Thank you for inviting me here. And to answer the question first, yes, I think both of these presentations give me hope for the future. I'm very happy to hear a cohesive and broad descriptions that you're giving of health and education, that you mentioned both formal education and informal education, and mental health care in addition to other health care. And I'm also particularly happy that you mentioned the village girl, and that this is about all of us. And that's also what I want to just give my own comment to as well, that we all, well, yeah, but this is about the people on the ground. And I don't want to talk about the people in Africa. I think we've already heard a lot of experts talking about that, even though I've met so many brave activists from all over the world. I think I just want to tell you about myself a little bit, because I'm here to represent Norwegian youth as well. And also to make the point that I don't believe that I deserve to speak to such a good audience any more than a young woman from Congo would have deserved. But I happen to be here. And for one, I think it's because Norway is the only country that right now prioritized to bring a young person along to the board meetings of the Global Fund. And I applied for that position because I think it's very important that if Norway have the funding, that we need to take that opportunity and go there and talk about how youth need to be funded with HIV medicine and other services. Not because I am affected by HIV and that I am the expert, but because Norway has given me the opportunity. Also, just growing up in Norway, being able to participate in Norwegian organizations, having experience from Norway allows me the capacity to be able to do that. And being given a Norwegian education has allowed me a lot of knowledge and also the confidence to do this. So I kind of feel a responsibility, and I do this in solidarity with the other young women, not because I want an international career. So I mentioned education. The other part is health. I've been so lucky to be born in Norway and to be provided with the Norwegian healthcare. Not to speak about myself again, but I also experienced to be diagnosed with a syndrome that no one else in Norway had before me. So I've spent a lot of time in hospitals and with Norwegian doctors. Very grateful for all of the assistance, but I also learned that in the end, because they never heard about this diagnosis before, I had to work with them and speak for myself and say what I needed. And that's also why I want to be here and talk about youth participation, because we do know best ourselves, even though the doctors know the medicine. So we need this dialogue. And also to mention then, because you mentioned healthcare and mental health care, and because earlier today we talked about gender equality and how women are victims of violence, and some asked the question about including men. Yes, I also want to emphasize that it's very important that men participate. That's my experience from Norway, and something that I would like to see for other young girls, other places, that when young Norwegian men talk about gender equality, they teach me that I should claim this right. It's very important for me to have that support from men. Now, when I am working with men as a colleague, I experience that as a help. I also remember from being younger to actually be a little frightened by masculinity and by me being a girl, because I also witnessed violence by a man when I was a child, when I was 5 years old. So this is, I just want to make that point as well, not just to talk about the women as victims, but the fact that men say this was not good, it was not right, it's also very important.
Thank you, Dr. Mukwege. We have a French-speaking person on the first row here, in case there are some misunderstandings, but we'll try in English. In your view, how important is discrimination of women as an obstacle for improving women's health on the ground?
Yeah, I think that what what is happening is that to discriminate women in the health system, for example, for Africa, I can say that women are economically, they are the one who are supporting the economy. Women are, I can say the economy of Africa are on the shoulder of the women. And I think that when you discriminate them, when you don't give them opportunity to access correctly to the system, the health system, it means that you exclude 50% of the population to produce. And I think that this is really a big problem now in Africa. For example, to ask women to do everything, and they are responsible also for the reproductive health. And when it comes in a conflict area, they are also victims. So I think that the one thing that today we can do in conflict area and in Africa generally is really to think about how we can support as much as possible to support the reproductive health, because with this we can reduce we can increase the possibility of women to participate in the economy. The second thing, when women are victims of rape, and this is something which is reducing also all their capacity. I come just to say about the mental health. I've seen that when a woman she's raped, after most of the time, psychologically, she's not able to take responsibility in the family, to take responsibility of his own children. So I think that we need really to improve the quality of the system health for women and give this accessibility if you want to improve the economy and the development of Africa.
Gumbonzanda, do you want to comment? Is discrimination of women, is that the serious threat to women's health on the ground?
It's, we see it every day. Who is making decisions about access? We see the disempowerment of women and the exclusion impacting significantly. And it takes me back to the discussion on education and saying, education for what? I think we see more and more that it's important to focus on the education outcomes to go beyond getting a decent jobs, because what we've seen with women is, as Dr. Mukwege said, women are entrepreneurs. So we need to say, how can we invest in education in order to unleash the entrepreneurship capabilities that exist within communities?
What would you suggest? How to let the entrepreneurs bloom?
I think there are very practical ways. One is supporting the market women. I mean, just starting from where we are basically is supporting the market women to move from being micro to actually going macro. I think there is a whole range of possibilities. I lead the YWCA, which is a very exciting social entrepreneur, because we run schools, we run hostels, we run hotels. So we actually combined providing community services with providing employment, with training for entrepreneurship. I think those models are very important, that we continue to have the public-private sector relationship. I think the other bit which is very important is also to look at how can there be much more stronger relationship with local private sector organizations. How can the work that Norway does, working with civil society, but also foster relationship in communities, in countries, with those groups which are going into social enterprise.
Anette Remme, can you comment on discrimination of women as a constraint of efforts for improving health and reducing poverty?
I think very simply that discrimination against women hinders gender equality and therefore the development for all of us and health. Women's health is important for the whole family's health, of course. Again, gender equality, and women represent half of the population, so both men and women need the same healthcare so that they can all be productive. And also, I think we need to talk about the diversity, how important it is for society to include men, women, young, old, disabled, LGBT. Everyone are resources, and to discriminate any of them will be a hinder to health and education and development.
Dr. Mukwege, in all discussions about development cooperation, there is a question, what works and what does not work? You are working under the most extreme conditions. If you ask you what works?
Yeah, I want to add about the discrimination. I think that our experience can show that when you can give education to women, and especially teach them the right, because, you know, we have some culture who is just showing women that they can't. And this is terrible, because when someone has impression that he can't, so he accepts this condition. And what I've seen that many women, after to go through rape, and we teach them only the right to know what is the right. And you can see that after they become really activists, and they become themselves the agent of change in their own community. And I think that what is working for me today, I can see in the rural area women who come to the hospital, and they went through our program. And today, they are well trained to know how, for example, to use information, how to fight for their own right, how to fight for the right of the community, and how to protect each other. Sometimes we are talking about protection, and we have impression that it's only the state who have to protect. But I have experience on the ground. Last time in Rutshuru, in the eastern of Congo, really, we got to girls who could give us information, correct information, and ask, what can we do in this situation? So I think that if you have this possibility to give education, to teach the right of the women, and support them, so economically they can be able to be sufficient, I think that these three things can help a lot. And what I can see in the field is really girls that are taking their own responsibility.
As in our results report, it says that girls' education solves almost all. What do you think, Madam?
Yes, I think that what I come just to say is when they have education, and this is really a key point to try to change things in Africa and in the development country, because if there is no education, they will get another way to see things. And today is to be just a girl who belongs to a man. And all the girls, she's the daughter of a man. She become a woman of a man. And after, she's a mother of boys. And this is not a way to see women. If really want them to evolve and to be able, they must to be themselves. They need their own identity. And this don't exclude men and women to be together. But the problem is that women have to be women, and there they need education to stand for themselves.
I want to follow on that discussion in terms of the content of that education to girls. That girls need comprehensive sexuality education, which enables them to be able to make the decision on the most private, personal, difficult issues where their bodies are controlled by almost everybody else. So if we have comprehensive sexuality education in schools, in communities, that in a way significantly goes to empowering the girls for making appropriate health decisions. It also helps them to negotiate relationships and also to negotiate within the family. I think the other two components which are very important in terms of girls' education is the self-confidence, self-esteem, and personal leadership skills, because those are part of addressing the disempowerment and the exclusion. So the whole content around life skills, personal leadership, and team building is very, very crucial in terms of the girls standing up to be young women, being part of the community, and being able to make informed decisions. I think the last is to build assets around the girls, to say, when we do education for girls, what is the support network that is around those girls? So that it's not just an individual girl standing on her own. This is why in the work that we do in the YWCA, we are very strong around creating safe spaces for girls, whether it's in school or it's in community, because we are saying girls, whether for education or for health, needs a support mentorship network, so that if they have those personal issues, let's go to social media. If they have those issues where they are being tracked by somebody on their Facebook page, they cannot talk about it there, some scream on it, but they want to talk to somebody. So it's important to create peer networks. We support girls to access quality education and to also have the protection that they need.
Anette Remme, protection, how important is that?
Protection of...
Or you want to comment on girls' education as something that can solve almost all?
I'm not sure I would say that that will solve all, but it's truly
it says
very
almost
important.
All, yeah.
It says almost all. But for the women and girls individually, it is that will solve their future, perhaps. That's the key for them to become the agents of change that they can become. And I think that's very important to remember that we invest in people that become resources and that become agents who drive changes in their local community. So in that sense, yes, I agree. As I already mentioned, I think we need to think as a whole about gender equality and not only put the girl to school and think then we can relax and now everything's going to work out. I think we need to talk about how men need to open up space for them to come into the workplaces or to sit around the board table and the man in the house to actually ask his wife of her opinion instead of him making decisions. So I think giving girls education, but also for the society to open up for girls to participate.
Let's move over to the role of the civil society. You all belong to, in a way, civil society organizations. How important are civil society organizations, Anette, you can continue, when it comes to making a difference on the ground for regular people?
So maybe to continue on the agents of change that I mentioned, and you mentioned peer education. I think civil society is very important to create a platform for people to come together and meet peers who share, have the same experiences and challenges and ideas that they want to discuss about changes that they want to see. So civil society creates a platform for people to come together and to strengthen themselves as agents of change. And then secondly, civil society is very important as a source of information for the policymakers to hear the voices from the ground of what is needed. And yeah, so it's very important. And then one point that I wanted to leave here today is that it's important moving forward for Norway, for example, as a donor to invest in youth-led organizations. That civil society forms organizations that are led by the people that the organization is there for. Young women have their own organizations that are led by young women so that they actually become leaders instead of having civil society with adult men leading and then young women receiving. That's also very important for the participation to be meaningful.
Dr. Mukwege, you work in what you could call a military society. What role can civil society play in a country ruled by the military?
Yes, I think that the role of this civil society is really a big role, especially when you are in the country where there is no rule of law, where the state don't exist. And I can say that in my country especially, I can see how the civil society, especially organization of women on the ground, can make things happen even if the government is not there. And the one thing that we have to do is really to reinforce them, to give them possibility to be able to make the follow-up of things. And for example, today, when it comes to my country, we have this peace agreement of Addis Ababa. And I think that we have the resolution 1325, but in Kampala we don't have women. in this peace negotiation. And for me, I can just say, if we can give more place of women in this kind of negotiation, to be able to follow what the government is doing, to be able to be a kind of another force against, not against, but who can just make like a follow-up of things. I think that this can make a big difference, because we can see when the state is not exist, it's always the civil society, and especially the women organization who is taking over. So we need to reinforce them, to give them capacity to be able really to work on the ground.
Gumbonzanda.
For me, the discussion around civil society have a couple of elements. Yes, we are the space for citizens to self-organize, to contribute to policy, to contribute to provision of services, to monitor accountability. But at the same time, we need to be very conscious of how civil society itself needs to be inclusive of the different streams of identity. I think we've heard about the importance of the youth movement, the women's movement, the issue-based movements, and to say, how do we bring synergy and integration across the faith-based networks, the media networks? How do we create much more integration? And within that role of the importance of civil society, when I moved from being in the UN and speaking from a civil society, there are certain things which as civil society we can say. I think civil society as citizens can have a broader voice to say certain things. And I think that is a very important role that the enabling environment for the voice of civil society needs to continue to be there. Because the challenges I face at the moment being in civil society, and even with the acknowledgement of the role of civil society, is that there's shrinking space for civil society participation. Very shrinking space. So at times we hear, oh, we need to include civil society, but when we are there, there's maybe one room only for one person inside the table of decision making. So the space is reducing. And secondly, the second challenge is that, yes, civil society is so under-resourced. At times there is a lot of very trickling of resources, as we have said earlier. So I think that is also an issue. And lastly, is civil society in conflict situations and in crisis. Where civil society where we need protection of civil society as human rights defenders, as institutions, because at times they are raising issues which are critical issues relating to security, to rule of law, and to their own communities, and yet also need to be able to provide services. So the protection of civil society as institutions is very fundamental to the capabilities that we have to deliver services, to influence policies, and to seek and work on oversight issues and accountability issues.
We started with saying this session, and we are going to wrap up now, that the future is female and young. And Anette Remme, how should the young people's voice be heard? Today, the majority of the world's population are young people. But how can their voice be heard?
I already mentioned the one point that I had for this question, which is that we need to invest in the youth-led organizations so that they really can decide over their own budgets and their own politics and drive their own movements. And maybe a second point to bring up again the point that Tore Godal had about how young people today travel more and meet people from everywhere, and we can create networks. I've also experienced to be part of that now in the AIDS movement, and it's really powerful to see how we can manage within a couple weeks to reach out to 100 countries and translate stuff into many languages and then do concrete projects together. So hopefully that power and the social media that we have as a tool can help us to really be seen and heard, because it creates a very big movement when we can communicate that way.
Thank you very much. Thank you for participating in this panel.